Today, you are going to complete your masterpiece poem final draft. For this assignment, you will need your poetry packet number 3, where you have written your masterpiece rough draft, which is the last poem you wrote in your poetry packet number 3. So we are going to take this rough draft and transition it into a final draft. So if you go to today's lesson on Schoology, and in the final draft, you are currently watching the video already. You are going to take that rough draft that you wrote yesterday, and you are going to fill it in to the attachment below using Kami. You're going to turn it in when done, and your masterpiece poem final draft is officially due Monday by midnight. So you do have a little extra time to submit it, since you will be sharing this poem in our poetry collection. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the final draft with Kami. And there's some highlighted information. This one might look a little different than our previous final drafts. You are going to be typing your masterpiece poem final draft on page 2 of this document. Please remember that this poem will be included in our poetry collection that will be shared with all of my 7th graders, and this poem might even be displayed. So whatever you write about, please be aware that people other than myself will be reading it. Now, because of this, you can add your name below the title of your poem, or you can leave your name off, which means to leave it anonymous. If you leave your poem anonymous, it means that when I put it into the poetry collection, your name will not be attached to it, and nobody will know that you wrote it except for me. There were very few requirements in this poem. It does need a title, and it does need to be 10 or more lines. But a couple other things is it will need to fit in the box that I provide on page 2. The only way it can go into my poetry collection is if it fits in that box. It also needs to be in black ink only, and whatever font you use, it needs to be readable. We need to use black ink because of how I'm going to print my poetry collection, and readable so that others can enjoy it. Besides that, you were able to choose your topic, you were able to use however many stanzas you wanted, and you had full control of the poetic devices that went into your poem. So on the second page, this is where your actual poem will get typed, in this box here. And again, it has to fit inside this box. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is add my title, because you are required to include a title. So I'm going to start with my first text box, and it's going to have the title of my poem. And again, I am just going back to the rough draft that I put into my poetry packet number 3. And that rough draft is now being transferred over to my final draft. So my masterpiece poem was called The Never Ending Year. And it says that never ending is not spelled correctly. So I'm going to look up some options. I like the hyphenated one, so I'll go with that. And now my title is done. Now, if I wanted people to know that I wrote this poem, I would add another text box and put by Mrs. Orcharding. This means that when my poem gets published in the poetry collection, people will know that I wrote it. Then I'm going to start my next text box, and I am going to start typing my poem. After every line, I'm going to remember to hit enter so that it goes down to the next line and that I end up with the right amount of lines when I'm done. And once I have my entire rough draft now typed into my final draft, I'm going to go over it to make sure I'm happy with it. And I can go ahead and make changes as long as I still make sure I have 10 lines and that it still fits within this box. So I'm going to make a couple of tweaks to this. For example, I am going to add an automatopoeia somewhere. There's a nice automatopoeia. I'm going to separate it out so I get 2 stanzas instead of 1. And now I think I'm happy. But I've changed my mind. I don't want people to know that I wrote this poem. I want to keep it anonymous. So I'm going to take my name off. Then I'm going to move my poem up a little bit here. Maybe I'll move my title so that it's a little bit more over the middle. And here we go. I have now typed up the final draft of my masterpiece poem. I made sure that it had a title, it had 10 or more lines, it fit in the box, it used black ink, and it was readable. I decided to make mine anonymous, so nobody's going to know that I wrote it except the teacher. And I am aware that it will be put into a poetry collection so that others are reading it, and it may even be displayed. So now that I am satisfied with my masterpiece poem, I'm going to turn it in, hitting that turn in twice until it takes me back to Schoology. I'm going to submit it, and I am now done. And I know I actually have until Monday, November 11th, to submit my final draft. And I know if I have any questions, I can reach out to Mrs. Borkerding to get help.